Hi everyone, I hope you're all safe and well and somehow managing to enjoy the warm weather. Today's video is all about Instagram and, more to the point, how we as street photographers can get the most out of it. As we're all stuck indoors, now is probably a really good time to have a look at things like Instagram and make sure we can hit the ground running once we're released. So before we begin, just a reminder that if you're stuck for ideas for what to do in this lockdown period, do have a look at my earlier video where you'll find lots of ideas and inspiration, and I'll put the link up here. Street photographers have had a long attachment to Instagram, but I've got to say that today it's a Marmite thing. Most people either love it or they hate it. What do I think? Well, although I'm what you'd probably say is a late adopter, I've got to say I find it really useful, and we'll talk more about that later. But before we go any further, let's go back in time. In its earlier days, Instagram was for pictures taken on a phone, a kind of way to record what was snapped, and it was, let's say, unsophisticated. Then over the years, more serious photographers got involved and it became more of a showcase for their work. Fast forward to today, and what we have is a real mix. Yeah, there's still lots of the spontaneous stuff and pictures of fingernails and kittens and parties, but you've also got high-end commercial photographers marketing their portfolios on there. And you've got lots of sponsored posts, lots of advertising. So it's really changed. But in the middle of all that, you've got street photographers and lots of street photography. So street photography is massive on Instagram. Just look at the hashtag street photography and you'll see thousands or tens of thousands of images posted every day. Personally, I think that's a good illustration of how hashtags can be abused or misused. You just have a look, search the hashtag street photography and just see what you get. And you'll probably find that a lot of what you're looking at is most definitely not street photography, however you care to define it. Maybe that's a discussion for another day. So why do I use Instagram? Well, for me, it serves several purposes. Firstly, it's a showcase for some of my own work. I've got about 16,000 people following me. So if I post just one image a day, that's hitting a pretty big audience, assuming, of course, that some people actually look at it. But even if some do, at least some do, then I'm pretty happy with that. So for me, there's a commercial imperative. If people like my work, they might look at my profile, follow the link to my website, and then book a workshop. So in that sense, it certainly works. Secondly, I use it as a means to see what other people are doing. And by that, I mean people whose work particularly interests me, but also folks who've been on my workshops. And it's just a great way of keeping track of what they're doing, keeping in touch with them, looking at their work, watching how their images are developing over time. Thirdly, and this is a good one, it can be inspirational. And if you follow the right people, you'll have a constant stream of good work landing on your screen all day long. And I find this inspires me. It makes me more creative in my own thinking. It sparks ideas for work, particularly projects. And then finally, it's a social network, isn't it? And I use it to communicate with people I know, meet new interesting people, collaborate on projects, and so on. So for me, Instagram does have value. But I also think that the more careful I am about who I follow, the more value it has. We can waste a lot of time getting into this whole thing about who we follow and who follows us, and it can be very distracting. Anyway, let's get to the main purpose of this video, which is my top 10 tips for street photographers for using Instagram effectively. That first tip is all about followers. And please remember this, if you remember nothing else, it's the quality that counts, not the quantity. It's far better to have 100 of the right followers than it is 10,000 who you don't know, and many of whom won't care one bit about you or your work. So I would strongly advise against what is often a crazy grabbing attempt to get followers, whether that means buying blocks of them or subscribing to one of these follow and unfollow services that are popular. Just don't go down that track. Look at it this way. Does anyone actually care about how many followers or likes you have? Are they bothered? Do people think you're a better street photographer if you're popular? I hope not. If you're doing the right stuff, the followers and the likes will come, and you really do need to play the long game. Secondly, post only your best work. And this is where people will form an impression of you and your work, and these first impressions really do matter. If people like what they see, it could lead to some positive interactions, maybe more, who knows. If they're not seeing your best stuff on there, the chances are that they'll move on and they won't come back. Remember that people's internet attention span is minimal, and if you don't hit them with something interesting right away, they're gone. Stories, people often ask me about stories. Use the stories for additional content, your behind the scenes stuff, your wacky stuff, your other stuff, your fun stuff, but don't clutter up your main feed with this. Save that for your best work. Thirdly, remember that composition matters. Instagram is made up of horizontal and vertical lines. It's a grid system. So get your lines straight and take care about how one image lines up with its neighbours, not only to the sides, but above and below it. So really consider how pictures work together, whether certain images will jar when positioned next to each other. How they will work on the page is important, and your page needs to feel designed rather than just thrown together. Personally, I use an app called Whiteogram, and I'll pop a link to that below. Now this gives me a nice crisp white border around my images, and it allows me to post in either landscape or portrait formats rather than Instagram's regulation square format. And this is a big thing for me. I don't often compose to a square, but if I do, that's fine and it's useful for Instagram. I normally compose to a landscape format or occasionally portrait, and using Whiteogram allows me to do that. Tip number 4, be consistent in your style. Don't try to be all things to all people. For example, don't mix landscapes with street photography, with still life, with weddings, with pictures of cars. If you are really interested in lots of different genres and you're serious about using Instagram, then I would suggest having separate feeds for these different ones. You don't need to have too many, but I really would keep your street photography separate. It's very easy to set up multiple accounts on Instagram. But you really do need to think about how your feed reflects your voice as a photographer. Is the right sound coming across loud and clear? Tip 5, this is super important if you want to grow your presence on Instagram. Be generous with others. Remember, this is a community, it's a network, and we're all there because we want to engage. And the best way to do that is by offering genuine praise and feedback. Having said that, I probably wouldn't offer critique on this platform unless it was specifically asked for. If people take the trouble to comment on your images, reciprocate with a few nice words. It takes a few seconds and it reinforces your standing as a good person. So, tip number 6, post regularly, but don't post loads at once. Personally, I find that about one post a day feels right for me. But just do whatever works for you. If you can only post one image every few days or one a week, that's fine. It'll just take you longer to build your community. But try to be regular. Gosh, I sound like a bowel doctor. Try to be regular. If you normally post between 7 and 8 a.m, then try to keep with that convention. Timing is very important. Think about when your audience is tuning in. For me, I get the sense that my audiences are tuning into Instagram between about 7 and 8 a.m. So that works well for me, and that's when I get the most traction for my posts. You may find that mid-afternoon works best for you. I think that aiming for a time when people are having breakfast, when they're commuting to work, when they're heading home is probably a good time. But I think it also comes down to whatever time zone you're operating in and who you want to appeal to. So the next tip, leave the filters, the emojis, the watermarks, the overlay texts, leave them in the description box. Don't put them on your main feed. Don't put them on your images. While these things all have their place online, they can often end up just spoiling the aesthetic feel on what is, or what should be, a carefully curated street photography Instagram page. Street photography is, after all, it's a genre that is typically historically defined as capturing candid moments with a lot of importance given to authenticity. So do bear that in mind. The next tip, use hashtags, but don't abuse them. Hashtags are really important in drawing attention to your post. But just look, for example, at all these images that have the hashtag street photography. So if you're posting, for example, a bowl of lovely Amalfi lemons in the sunshine, don't use a street photography hashtag, or hashtag or tag one of the well-known street photography collectives. This just serves to undermine your credibility on Instagram. And using inappropriate hashtags in this way will just hack people off and alienate your community. Having said that, if we use the right hashtags, we can bring people in and it will help people discover you and your work. So tip number 9, captions are really important. People tend to like captions. Sometimes I'll explain a shot and its context, maybe a particular technique I've used or something about the location perhaps. It's up to how much you put in, but at least say something. And for me, as a bare minimum, I would put the location and the date, London 2016 or whatever it is, Venice 2020. There's been quite a lot of research that has shown that people engage more, and by engage more, I mean they either like or follow more. They engage more with a captioned image, so it's worth spending a few extra seconds just doing this. Finally, tip 10, create an easy workflow for yourself. Yes, you can post directly from your mobile device, and that's straightforward. I know that many people hold back from using Instagram because they think they can only post pictures taken on their phone. Well, there are other ways. And just to give you a flavour, this is how I do it. My Instagram workflow starts with, on the PC, on my phone, on my tablet, I have Lightroom CC, which is synced across all the devices and I can access it from anywhere. So all my images are in Lightline CV. So once I've identified the image that I want to post on Instagram, I click the share button in Lightroom and share it first of all to Whiteogram, which is that app I mentioned earlier, which gives me those nice white crisp borders. From there, I share directly to Instagram, where I insert my hashtags, my other data, metadata, whatever it is, so that I got everything there with that image. With hashtags, I have my most used hashtags saved in a note in the Notes app. And I just copy and paste some of them, not all of them, but some of them, maybe around half of them, adding as many image specific hashtags as I can. So I build my own hashtag, my bespoke hashtags in later. Then I'll include an entry in the location field. There's lots of research that shows that engagement is significantly higher on average if you include a location in your images. So this whole process, my whole workflow, takes about 30 seconds per image, which is nothing. And the longer you spend doing it, the quicker it gets. So don't believe that you must have this to use Instagram. You don't. It is possible to post directly from a PC or Mac, and there is a hack, and lots of people do this. I don't, but there is a hack, and you can easily find this just by searching for it on Google. So that's about it. That's how I use Instagram. I don't get stressed about how many followers or likes I have. I just enjoy it for what it is and use it as best I can. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, that would be great. I'm at StreetSnappers. And I hope you found this video useful. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm an ambassador for Fujifilm, I write books about street photography, and I put some links to my books below, and I run street photography workshops, links also below. If you'd like to subscribe to this channel, that would be great. There's lots more to come about street photography, and I hope you'll tune in again soon. Thanks for watching.